Hey friends, what's going on? It's Mike from Go Cell Phone Repair for the weekly Monday afternoon tech talk. By techs, for techs, and about tech, all the above. And well, it's for everyone really, but we're going to be discussing a variety of topics today. We obviously have to say something about the HomePod. It's out, it's been reviewed, people are talking about it, and if you don't already have one, you're trying to decide whether or not it's worth investing in. We have the ZTE Axon 9 specs and photos leaked, and when I say leaked, I mean leaked the way that specs are always leaked, because it's not like this stuff gets out accidentally most of the time, but you know, it's kind of how you play that game, right? Earphones that explode while you wear them in your ears at the gym. If this is a real story, it's something to be concerned about because, you know, most of us are going to Bluetooth in one way or another, whether we want to or not. So if you're going to be putting something in your ear with a lithium-ion battery that could potentially explode, that's going to be pretty serious. How to tell if your iPhone is refurbished, customized, used, new, all that stuff. Pretty sure we have a reliable method to do that. Once again, they took that option away for a while, but according to an article that I read, it's back. So that's kind of cool. And we also have some very interesting, exciting news about guests that are coming up for the Thursday night live stream, which we do at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Hope you can make that as well. Let's get it started. I hope you guys had an awesome weekend. I see we had people in the chat already. Nate, Juan, Vernil, Carl, everyone, good to see you. I see what happened there, Nate. You had your mod account and then you were signed in on something else. So I was thinking, I know I didn't take that away or anything like that. And we had, oh, by the way, Juan, I wanted to say for everyone out there, that little countdown at the beginning, that is not designed to create anticipation. The reason that I threw that in there is because usually when I start streaming, it takes people a little while to get on here. And so in the future, I'll try to put something a little more entertaining than a countdown timer, but I thought it'd be cool just to send that alert out. I see that people have clicked on the bell notification icon, which is awesome because that means you get to see that this is coming up before it starts or right when it starts, I guess. And that's a funny thing about Google. You know, you subscribe to someone's channel and you don't get the information right away. You have to click that extra little bell notification thing. Otherwise, they won't tell you. So let's go over to the comments here real quick so I can get caught up. I always try to keep up with what everyone is saying. And let's see, 10 seconds to go on this account. I have an iPhone 6. I have an iPhone 6. Tell me what happened when it only says no service. Yeah. Excuse me, that can be a lot of different problems, but like Nate said, that's one of the ones that we're seeing quite often now because there's a problem with the baseband CPU because of its location on the logic board. Over time, as that PCB flexes, it causes the basically where it's attached to the motherboard underneath to become fractured so that you have a connection there sometimes, but not always, and sometimes it's completely gone. Sometimes when the phone is warm, it works better. Sometimes if you put a little pressure on it, you can get it to pick up signal. But if that's your problem, and I always recommend you rule out everything else because this is kind of a risky repair if you have to go to that extreme. If you replace or basically remove and reball the chip, like Nate said, sometimes you can restore that functionality, and it's usually a good idea to run a jumper wire just to kind of back up just in case the same problem occurs again. So I won't go too far into that. What's going on, Beha? Always good to see you here as well. I want to talk briefly about the HomePod because like I said, we don't want to make this all about Apple, but you know, if you look at any tech news, this is what's dropping like every week. One of the things that they're talking about are product releases, problems, software upgrades, things leaking, and of course the HomePod, which a lot of people have been waiting a very long time for. And the real question about that is that most people say is, you know, whether or not to buy it, and it really depends on who you ask, as is usually the case. You know, most people are on one side or the other. It's the best thing in the world, or there's no no reason that you should buy this product. And obviously the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle there, and you kind of have to decide that for yourself. I'd recommend that you read as much as in the way of reviews as you can from reliable sources. Go to the Apple Store, check it out. Of course, it's kind of noisy in there. You might want to go to like a Best Buy or somewhere else where you don't have quite as much background noise and see what you think for yourself. But what we do know about it so far, according to some sources, is that the sound is very impressive for the most part. Now, again, we have skeptics on either side, and one of the cool things about the HomePod is that it automatically determines what the acoustics are as far as where you place it in the room. So if it's standing on an island in the middle of the room or over in the corner, it kind of adjusts to that. And we've had people make comparisons. People who consider themselves audiophiles make comparisons to $1,000 speakers, saying this thing sounds just about as good as that, and for a lower price, although not as low as some of the other home assistants. And that's one of the big things. And according to Consumer Reports, they're saying that the HomePod sounds good, but other smart speakers sound better. Again, that's according to Consumers Reports. I think they're somewhat neutral, you know, when it comes to being biased, so I do like to see what they have to say about it. And they do recommend that if you want to buy something that's going to cost you a little bit less or maybe even sound better, you know, get more sound for the money, they recommend the Google Home Max or the Sonos One. Now, I can't speak from personal experience because I did not buy the HomePod, and I don't think that I will. And I'll go down this list and kind of tell you why. Even if I was just locked into the Apple ecosystem, I might think twice about buying that product now. You know, maybe something down the line might change my mind. But for the most part, right off the bat, it does not work with Android devices. And to me, that's kind of a deal breaker because I do like to switch back and forth between iOS and Android. You know, being in this business, we kind of like to have an understanding of how all these products work. And if you can just pop your SIM into another card and go, you're in good shape. But if that disables some of the functionality of other devices that you have connected, it's really a bummer, you know. And on top of that, the fact that it only works with Apple Music unless you stream through AirPlay, that's another thing that most people are saying will probably be corrected in a future release or a future upgrade. So somewhere down the line, they'll say, yeah, now you can use Spotify, which, you know, really should have been built in, I think, in most people's opinion. It's kind of baffling as to why that didn't happen. So, you know, be that as it may, there are ways around it. You can stream from your phone or from your other Apple device, but again, it's got to be something on Apple. You can't take a an Android product and connect it to this speaker. So, you know, again, the limitation there. On top of that, $350, which is quite a bit when you compare it to similar products, but that's something that we're kind of used to with Apple, and they generally will come out with something and say, hey, this is what the price is, but we're giving you the quality, the consistency, and the compatibility with our other products that you've grown accustomed to. So, you know, it's really hard to criticize them for that when they make it work. If people are willing to buy into that, and that's what makes the company profitable, and if those end users end up being satisfied with the device, you know, it's really hard to complain about that, right? I mean, it works for them in any case. Now, the other thing about these HomePods, which I thought was interesting, and I saw a review on them, which was really cool. You know, they had got like three. It's the tech couple, actually. I don't know if you guys are in here today or something. Say hello. But anyways, on their channel, they had like 3 different HomePods they were reviewing, which I thought was really cool. You know, that's the way to do it. Try out the different colors, put them in different positions, link them all together. Well, you can't. At least at this point in time, you cannot have simultaneous playback on multiple devices. So if you had a HomePod in your living room, one in the kitchen, one in the bedroom, it would be really cool if you had music going and it just kind of went from one room to the next. You know, no matter where you were, you can hear it. That function is not supported at this time. I suspect that that will be something that they add in the future, or maybe the HomePod 2 will take care of a lot of these, you know, what some people consider shortcomings, which again is by design kind of what a lot of companies do, and Apple is not exempt to that by any means. They'll release a product and then, you know, it can do 100 things, but you're not going to get 80 of them until the next generation comes out. So that, you know, from a business standpoint, makes sense. A little frustrating for the customers, but nothing new really. And here's the other thing. When you play music that is being streamed, obviously you have to initiate it from the phone. So you can't just tell the speaker to play some music that you want to stream from your phone. You have to go over to the phone, pull up whatever it is you want to play, set up your AirPlay, connect it, and start streaming from there. So that kind of takes away what a lot of people see as the advantage to having a home assistant, where you just tell it to do something and it does it. So at this point in time, at least, it's not there. The other thing about it is when you get to Siri, at this point in time, I know I keep saying that, but Siri is limited to one iPhone. So you hook up your iPhone to your HomePod and that's it. You can't have multiple users. That's my understanding. And that, I think, is another drawback. You know, most people who are using Apple products in their home tend to have more than one. You know, I've got an iPod and an iPhone. I've got a laptop. A lot of people are in that same boat. And I think it would be, you know, a good idea to allow support of multiple devices on top of the fact that it's not personalized. So it's not going to recognize your voice and differentiate that from anyone else, which means potentially someone walks up to your HomePod, which is paired up to your phone, and says, Siri, play back my text messages. It is going to play back the text messages that are on your phone to whoever asks it to do so. And you can imagine there are a lot of other commands that whenever this thing is linked to your phone, it's going to allow anyone who is within shouting range, shouting distance basically, of the device to tell it to do whatever they want it to, whatever commands are supported for it. So, as far as security goes, that might be a consideration for some people. It will work with your Apple Home devices. So this is kind of cool. If you've got a garage door opener or anything else that's hooked up to Apple Home, you can control it from the HomePod, which is cool. The big thing here, I think, for most people is that if you're not really into the entire Apple ecosystem, then there are going to be a lot of things about this that aren't going to work for you. If you're 100% Apple throughout for every device in your home, it's probably going to give you a lot more benefits than someone else who says, hey, I just want to compare this to an Amazon or a Google or anything else like that. It's kind of like, well, if you want to go Apple, you need to go all the way Apple with this. So, personally, it's not something that I'm going to look to, especially for the price at $350. And here's the other thing. This device is going to cost you, if you don't have Applecare, which I know they're trying to push this, if you don't have Applecare on this $350 HomePod, an out-of-warranty repair is going to set you back $279. So for all practical purposes, this is, unless you opt for Applecare, which is what I think they're really pushing you to do here, this is a disposable device if you break it. And to kind of reinforce that idea, iFixit did a teardown of this thing recently, and they apparently had a very difficult time with it. It's going as far as having to use a hacksaw at some part to get this thing open. So this is another thing that's really discouraging. Until we get some right to repair legislation passed and in effect that says manufacturers have to stop doing it, we're going to continue to see products designed that are meant to be disposable. You buy one and next year you buy another one. And if you break yours, there is no fixing it. And that's really unfortunate for not just the consumer and the environment, but just the competitive market as a whole. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and I wish people would stop doing this. And it doesn't look like they're going to, or companies, corporations, they're not going to do it voluntarily. We really have to have laws that make them do that. I am all for free enterprise and capitalism, but when you get to the point where you sell someone a product and it's just fixing it's not really an option, unless you buy this extra insurance. So why not just build that into the price up front and say, we're going to cover it? I don't know, just my thoughts. I had to reset my stream when you went live. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know what it is. These streams are a little funny, and I hope that they come a long way in the near future. And guys, I have a couple of guests coming up. I haven't got them scheduled yet, so I don't want to announce it, but they are personally working on a way to make this format that I'm using right here work with Google Hangouts, which is what I really want to do. So when we have the Hangouts, it's basically just cameras, one camera on each person talking. You can't really present anything this way. And these guys are working on a solution for that. And if it happens, it's going to be awesome. And hopefully it will solve a lot of these problems we have with that. What is the best place to order parts? For iPhones, I don't trust eBay all that much. And one, we get this question quite often. I will answer you. I think that I really need to put together like a video that answers that question, because it comes up pretty much on every live stream, and also tell you why I'm hesitant to really answer that. But I will give you an answer. I'm not gonna evade that one. Hi, Goran. Hey, how's it going? You were here quite a while back, right? I don't think I've seen you here for a while. From Hungary. Songor, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not. My apologies. I hate when I butcher people's names, and I certainly don't mean to. But wow, thanks for joining us from Hungary. I have to keep reminding myself that we have people everywhere in the world. So when I say 2 p.m., that's 2 p.m. my time. I have no idea what time it is over there. Probably quite different, but I really appreciate you guys coming on. And I'm just in awe of the fact that we can do this thanks to modern technology. Talk to someone on the other side of the world. So getting back to your question one, okay, I don't know what your position is, and I'll try to summarize this as quickly as possible, because I think a lot of people have heard the answer to this, and I'm sure you just want an easy one, and there's not one. And here's why. Suppliers' quality varies from one point in time to the next, which is why I'm hesitant to endorse any specific company that sells parts. As of now, a lot of people, including myself, feel that Injured Gadgets is among one of the better suppliers in the US. So if you're in the US, I'm not sure what your location is. If you're in the US, Injured Gadgets, you know, the preference really is to refurbish your own screens. Next to that would be to have someone locally that refurbishes for you, because it's much easier to deal with someone locally that way. And if you're in the market for a very small number of screens, you know, if you're only doing onesie, twosie stuff, I know that everyone in this industry hates it when I say so, but I do not have a problem buying from eBay when I do my research. Okay, so if you find a supplier on eBay, and it's difficult to trust things online, I understand that. Amazon, eBay, all these other places, it's just kind of a melting pot of who knows what. You really don't know what you're going to get. But if you do your research and you look at the feedback, and that's, again, this is one of the things I love about eBay, you get a lot of insight into how that supplier operates. You, in many cases, will be buying from a supplier who has a brand name that is very well known, that sells on their website and on eBay as well. Here's a hint to figure it out. If you look at the location that the part's being shipped from, and you go to any corporate website that supplies parts, you can usually get an idea of, you know, who that person is or where they're shipping from sometimes. We used to do that with our supplier in the East Bay, but they had some copyright problems and they're gone. So I don't mind buying from eBay if you do your research and you know who you're buying from. And on top of that, one thing that I think is an advantage is that if you have a problem, you can return just about anything as long as you don't physically break it. So if you run into quality problems, people who sell on eBay are very concerned about their reputation, because if they don't maintain it, they won't be around for very long. So obviously I look for certain criteria. I want someone who has sold, you know, several hundred or thousands of transactions, so that I know that they're going to be there for a long time. It's not just some guy who went on and, you know, started last month and has no real feedback history. And then I look at the feedback, and I look at the negative feedback, and I expect a certain amount of negative feedback for any business. I don't care what it is, because there are people out there who try to get extra stuff by complaining. So I'll excuse a small percentage. If someone has 98% positive feedback after 1,000 transactions, I feel pretty good about dealing with them. And if I have any problems, eBay, PayPal, and your credit card company will protect you. Now, I know we want to avoid that in the first place. You don't want to have to deal with returns or a pain in the butt. So as soon as you find someone that you like, you know, online or anywhere else, and you continue to deal with them, hopefully we can avoid that. But for now, I don't mind recommending Injured Gadgets as of today, February the 12th, 2018. I want to throw that in there because, you know, I have no reason to think otherwise, but I've had other suppliers burn me in the past where they provide good stuff, and then I recommend them, and then 6 months later they go to crap, you know. And in fact, one of them even went out of business, filed for bankruptcy, and stiffed a lot of people on money. So, you know, it's just really hard to say. I wish I was selling them myself, because then you could hold me accountable, but I'm not in that business. Yeah, so Juan, if you're in USA, I'd check out Injured Gadgets. I've heard a lot of good stuff about Mobile Centrics as well, with some very recent exceptions to that. So again, you know, it's really hard to know for sure. But those would be my two. I do buy from eBay on occasion, but probably my last thing I want to buy on eBay is screens, because that's the one place where you know, the quality varies quite a bit. I hope that's helpful. Hey, John Cassidy, how's it going? I cannot talk today. Hi, Mike. I'm not sure if you said this because I just came in. Did you see how expensive the HomePod is to replace? Yep, John, we actually just talked about that. $350 for the HomePod, $279 to replace it if it's out of warranty. And I want to say Applecare on that thing is $39. But they will fix the cord for you for $29 if that thing breaks or falls apart or whatever. And that was one of the things that I thought would be a huge opportunity for all of us in the repair community, because, you know, Apple's basically telling their customers, if you don't have AppleCare and you break your HomePod, you're out of luck. You might as well replace it, right? Why would you pay $279 to fix a $350 device? I thought this would be a great opportunity for us. I'm still not convinced that it won't be, but the concern is, the only teardown that I'm aware of at this point in time is from iFixit, and they sounded like they really struggled to get this thing apart without destroying it. So that's, you know, if you have to invest 3 hours into fixing something, how much can you really charge someone? So I guess the jury's still out on that. I would love this to be another product that was made to self-destruct or not be repairable, and then we could come in and have an opportunity to help people, you know, and offer them a better price and a better option. But I don't know if that's going to be the case yet. But yeah, it's just really sad, especially if they've designed this thing intentionally not to be repairable. You know, that's at some point it's got to end. But the sad truth is that as long as we don't have any legislation and Apple and Samsung are really only the only two big players as far as the US is concerned at this time. I don't think that's going to change for a while. So I hope we get some pressure from competition or from some laws, or at least a state steps up and says, hey, you can't sell it here unless you do this, because that's going to kind of set the precedent for any future cases that come up. I'm not promoting this person, however, on eBay. This is Nate talking. So if you hear Nate and he's got a wrench, if you hear Nate and he's here all the time, I would give him a lot of credibility. I've had a good experience buying from Wholesale Gadget Fix. Yeah, and I probably should have mentioned them. I bought from Wholesale Gadget Fix in the past, and it seems like they do pretty well. And yeah, that is the same person that has a website, if that's what you mean. So we've dealt with them before, and for the most part have a pretty good experience. And keep in mind that with any supplier you buy from, there is a certain defect rate. So it's not like, obviously if you're getting 1 out of 5 that are bad, there's a problem. But if you get like less than a 5% defect rate from any supplier, that's pretty decent for the most part. Yes, the beginning they said you good products and quality goes down. Seen it twice. Yeah, this is what I really. One of the reasons that as much as I would love to buy direct from China, it's difficult to do that because we've run into so many companies that have this thing. It's called quality fade, where you buy something from them. they send you samples. They're great. You get an order or two. Everything's cool. And then down the line, all of a sudden, it's like they start sending you their rejects. And you go, well, hey, I trusted you guys. I started buying more. I'm spending more money. And go to return something to, that you have to send overseas. It's a real headache. And it's unfortunate that that happens, because I think that there's probably a handful of companies out there who are giving a lot of other businesses a bad name because, oh man, I can't deal with China because, no, all this stuff comes from China. This is the thing that always blows my mind too. People say, oh, you're getting these cheap Chinese parts. Well, guess what? So are you when you buy your phone for the most part, unless you get something that was manufactured in Korea. Not too much stuff being made over here. Maybe that will change in the future. I don't know. But yeah, that is a bummer when that happens. Now, I want to talk about something other than Apple. I know, someone actually came on here and said, I'd love to see more repair videos that aren't Apple products. And I'm with you 100%. I just need to get a hold of more of them. And because there's so much market share for Apple, that's what we see a lot. It also simplifies things, so for the time being, if you can fix Apple products, you have quite a few opportunities. And that's all well and good, but we certainly want consumers to have a little more choice. ZTE in particular, which is one of the companies that a long time ago, in addition to Huawei and a few others, just basically made very low-end phones. And when I mean low-end, I mean cheap in quality and cheap in price, and that's what they were designed to be, and that's what they were. We pretty much called them disposable phones. Well, they have stepped up their game quite a bit, and they've come a long way. They had great success with the Axon 7. They actually took quite a bit of time off. They skipped the Axon 8 release, and they're moving over to the Axon 9 that's going to be coming out. We already have the leaks. Big surprise. That happens quite often. And I want to give you some of the specs here that are going to be on this. I know this is boring for some people, but in case you're wondering, and there's a good argument for why specs aren't everything when you talk about phones. I read another article recently which really made a lot of sense, based on my experiences and people around me. If a phone has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 845, you can have two different phones that have that same processor. They're not necessarily going to perform the same way, especially depending on what applications you're using, what else how much RAM you have, all these other factors that go in there. So when you start talking about stats and you look at a company like Apple, who has optimized all of their hardware to work together within its own ecosystem, and they are able to pull more performance out of less hardware specs for the most part, so it's not everything, but it gives us kind of a clue as to what to expect. Now, the Axon 9 will be running Android 8.0 Oreo out of the box. It does have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 845, according to these leaks. Again, we have an GPU is Adreno 630, 4 or 6 gigabytes of RAM. I suppose that depends on which version you purchase. The display is a 6-inch 2880 by 1440 AMOLED. So we're going to have AMOLED on ZTE Axon 9. The storage options, it looks like, are going to be 64, 128, and 256, which is great. We should, everyone who wants to gain market share right now should have at least reached 256, I think, on their top end model. And I still wish that we had removable storage, but that doesn't look like it's going to be something that comes back from most manufacturers. I suspect, based on the whole idea behind waterproofing or making water resistant phones. I shouldn't say waterproofing, right? The rear camera, 20 megapixels, f f over 1.7. I know that has to do with aperture. I'm not a camera expert, so interpret that the way that you can. Dual LED flash on that rear-facing camera. Front camera, 13 megapixels, which is great because we know that probably more people use their phone for taking front-facing pictures than using the rear camera. Debatably, right? Speakers are rear firing, so that's going to be interesting. When it says speakers and rear firing, I'm assuming we have a stereo system built into the backside of the phone. At least that's the way I am interpreting this. The fingerprint scanner is said to be embedded into the display, and every technician in the chat just sighed because this is what we probably don't want to see, more than likely, unless that display is still interchangeable and all the data that, you know, interprets the fingerprint is built onto the logic board or in some separate component, so that it won't mean that if you crack your screen, you can't replace it without losing that fingerprint functionality. I hope that ZTE is doing the right thing, which I think is to, you know, still make it possible to replace your screen without losing any functionality. We'll see what happens. I have a strong suspicion that if and when Apple ever moves to that sort of technology, that won't be an option. You know, I've been wrong before, though. You know, we thought the same thing with the facial recognition, and we know now that it's not actually built into the screen. You can transfer it from one screen to another on the iPhone 10, so that wasn't as much of a heartbreaker as we expected. But, you know, eventually someone, I think, is going to do that, and that's going to be a sad day for us and for the consumer. Pricing in the range of $550 to $630. So ZTE really not just moving up there in features and quality and options, but also in the price range. To see a ZTE phone for $630, that is a heck of a thing. I don't want to get behind here. Oh, here we go. So John Cassidy had 2 OEM for iPhone 6s from Injured Gadgets in a row. Problems were very small. It was a forced touch. It wasn't sensitive, and they felt terrible and was very embarrassed. Also paid for return shipping. Yeah, and that's, I think, the other big thing that, you know, is hard to get. I'm sure that no one in here has a lack of understanding when it comes to dealing with companies that are distributors, you know, repair shops, anything like that, suppliers. But the customer service is a big factor because, as we know, we're going to be expecting a certain number of defects. But if that company wants to take care of the problem as soon as possible, and you can tell they're sincere about it, and they do, you know, they reach out and say, hey, we're going to pay for the return shipping to get this back. We know that they're concerned about their reputation, and that's the kind of person I want to deal with. And that's the kind of company that I will spend more money with because I know that they care about what they're doing. You know, that's what it really comes down to, right? You know, obviously everyone has access to similar suppliers or similar refurbishing technology, but the ones that have the customer service built into that, you know, same as when you go to a repair shop. If someone has the lowest price in town, but they're a jerk, it's going to be hard to continue doing business with them, you know, unless that's your thing, I suppose. So I'm excited. By the way, I wanted to mention, after this video is finished, I will go through and create timestamps. I will also put links in the video description so that you can read these articles for yourself. You can see all the images up close. I can't really give away the entire article, but if you link to the article, you can read all about this stuff and see what these guys are saying is coming out. It's really interesting. I'm really happy that ZTE, Huawei, you know, despite the fact that there is so much skepticism, there's actually some politicians right now, senators, who want to make it illegal for anyone who works in government, I guess, or in the White House at least, to use any ZTE or Huawei products because they come from China. Or maybe it's just Huawei. I have to go back to that article. But, you know, I don't know if that's warranted. I suppose if it was a matter of national security, you want to be very careful about it, and it probably makes a lot of sense to support the American economy if you're in America by buying American products. But when it comes to phones, what are your choices really? You know, to a certain extent, I mean, Apple is an American company, but those phones and parts are still coming from outside the country. So to just kind of block out Huawei and or ZTE just because they are Chinese-owned companies brings a lot of questions up that I don't want to dig too deep into, but it's interesting because we really want to see this competition. But at the same time, if we say, hey, you guys can't sell anything over here, or you can't sell to certain places, it's going to be difficult to make that happen. So you think with all this technology we have at our fingertips, they could figure out how to prevent any problems from happening. Apparently they don't think so. Here's the one that concerns me, and it's not that. It is actually, let me get back to, did I forget to add something here? I think I did. Let's see. It's not the HomePod. It's not the Axon 9. It is the AirPods. So, according to an article, I have to say that because I certainly don't want to accuse any company of doing something like this that might not be true. But according to a report on SlashGear and a number of other publications online, there was a guy at a gym who was working out, and we've heard this story before because there was someone on an airplane who had a similar experience where they were using a pair of Bluetooth earphones, had them in their ear, and felt something sort of start warming up. So they removed the AirPods, at least in the first situation, and the lady said that the things exploded like right in front of her, kind of burned her neck, caused some minimal physical injury. Well, this guy said that he was working out at the gym. He had the same experience. He felt his AirPods starting to get warm. He took them out, and then for some reason, I don't understand the logic behind this, and this is one of the reasons that I'm slightly skeptical about this entire article altogether. And that is, he says that he took the AirPods, which were getting really hot, out of his ear, set them down, and then walked away to go find, I don't know, a fire extinguisher or assistance or something like that. And when he came back, he could see that they had basically exploded or caught on fire or somehow otherwise, experienced some burn damage. So, that really makes it questionable. And at the same time, it's not a huge stretch of the imagination to think that a lithium-ion battery can become unstable, because we know that. We've seen it happen. Samsung can certainly speak to that one. And my personal experience, this is the weirdest thing ever, guys. I was doing a repair, actually a recovery for a customer in Canada, and when I went back to the post office to ship his iPod back to him, they told me that I could not ship a lithium battery out of the country, period. So this is the post office, and I wasn't aware of that previously. I haven't had to deal with that situation before. We all know that you can't ship lithium-ion batteries by air. So when you go to the post office and you want to ship a phone or something back to a customer, if it doesn't have a removable battery and isn't minus a battery, you've got to use ground shipping, which pretty much slows the process down. And there's some sort of federal regulation that governs that. So that's totally understandable. So I said, look, I need to ship this ground to Canada. Well, obviously, or apparently I should say, that's not an option. So if you want to ship internationally, of course, intercontinental shipping, I get that. But shipping from here to Canada, and I'm in California, you cannot do it by ground. It's got to go air, which basically means you cannot ship phones from the US to Canada. So what do? Because he shipped it to me, and it was delivered by the post office to my address, but I can't send it back to him because of this whole lithium-ion thing. So UPS said they will do it. It's got to be in a special type of box and all sorts of other stuff. And this is the other thing that, kind of made me curious, because I had this box, if you remember. This was the box for my Galaxy Note 7 that I had to send back to Samsung, and they sent me an extra box for some reason. You can see it's got like some sort of fireproof material on the inside, and it's labeled here, caution, will explode on site, or whatever it says. And this actually does ship by UPS, and it says specifically on the front of the label, UPS ground. So I assume that UPS has trucks to go to Canada. I don't know. We'll see. We will find out. So if you have iPod, or AirPods, I should say, or any sort of Bluetooth earpieces, which, if you have an iPhone, you're going to have to, for the most part, unless if you have the over-the-ear design, you're going to have to make sure that if they start warming up, you get them out of your ear, because, obviously, this has always been my big thing. If your phone explodes, it could burn your house down. That's pretty scary, but chances are that's not going to happen. But if you've got something in your ear and it explodes, you can only imagine the physical damage that can be caused by that and what sort of lawsuit might result. So careful out there. I'll keep you all updated if we hear anything more about this, but that is a really scary one to deal with. Now, here's some potentially good news, and I say that because I want to do a little more research. I just found this today, and I'm not 100% that, convinced that this is accurate, but if it is, it's good news for everyone, especially consumers. A long time ago, we used to be able to take a look at an iPhone serial number, and we could tell if the unit was refurbished or not. So what would happen, and we've had this conversation with a lot of customers, and everyone should be aware of this. When you take your warranty device into Apple and you say, hey, this thing's broken, I need it fixed, and they say, well, you're under warranty, there's no physical damage, we're going to replace it for you, a lot of people get the impression that they're getting handed a brand new iPhone, iPod, MacBook, whatever it is. And in many cases, that is not what is going to happen. As you can imagine, if you have a $1,000 iPhone 10 and one little thing goes wrong with it and you hand it over to Apple, they're going to hand you another $1,000 device. They can't stay in business for very long doing that. So what they'll do is they'll take your device and they'll swap it out with one that's already be repaired. been repaired. And this is one of the things that it's hard to communicate to a customer, because if you're in the repair business, it's going to sound like, hey, I just want you to let me repair your phone instead of Apple. But, this is a real thing. When you go to a manufacturer, in most cases, they're not going to repair your device, but they're going to give you one that someone else had a problem with before. They think that they figured out the problem, fixed it, and hand it back to you. So you're getting a device that was broken by someone else, and we really don't know the full history behind that. And I try to make that, get any information I can that makes it easier to communicate that to the customer, so it doesn't just sound like I'm trying to sell them something. Well, back in the day, what we could do, and I want to say this was good up to about the iPhone 4S, if you looked at the serial number, you go into the settings on your phone, you can see the IMEI, the storage, the model number, all this kind of stuff, and they would, at the end of the serial number, they would add a letter K, as in Kit Kat, okay? So at the end of your serial number, there was a K, and that would indicate that the phone had been refurbished. So I don't know why they did this, but when they did the refurbishing process and repaired the phone, they would change the serial number so that they knew what was going on. And a customer would come in and say, yeah, I've only had this phone, it's brand new, I just got it, a month ago, and it's already having problems. And we would look at the serial number immediately and go, yeah, that's because your phone's been refurbished. So this was not a brand new phone. And of course, they would insist that it was brand new, and we would show them how we would determine this. And we take phones off the shelf and go, see this serial number? Here's what your phone should look like. Here's another one, here's another one, here's another one, and then here's yours with the K at the end. And that indicates that your phone is refurbished. And of course, this is a big surprise to a lot of people, because when you get handed a phone in a box and it's wrapped up and it's got shrink wrap around it, you think you've got a brand new phone until you have a reason to believe otherwise. Well, according to this article, and I will add this down to the video description, I do want to pull up the article so that I can read these specifically to you, but there is, let me see if I can find it, there is actually a number. Give me just a second, everyone, because I want to be able to show you this. Well, where'd it go? Well, we might have to wait on that one. I thought I had it right in front of me. In any case, this is, oh boy. Okay, I'm gonna have to come back to that. I'm not sure where I put it. There are several different numbers that are being added into the serial number on iPhones, like modern day iPhones, apparently, that will indicate whether it's new, whether it's refurbished, whether it's been used, and whether it's customized, whatever that means. So you should be able, if you go to Apple and have your phone replaced, pull up the settings, take a look at the model number. Ah, man, this is going to stand by, everyone. I want you to be able to see this. I actually want to be able to read it to you so you can know what I'm talking about here, because this is pretty important. This is from a, where do we go? This is from a publication called Iman Goss. So let me pull this up real quick. I had it open and I must have closed the window. So Iman Goss, GOSS.net, I believe was the site that I was on. And I added an extra letter on there. So they actually tell you exactly what to look for. And again, I want to confirm this because there is no other article other than this one, and that always leads me to be skeptical. And with all of the news that we have that is not entirely accurate, I don't want to lead anyone in the wrong direction. But I want to tell you what this article said. So here's what imangoss.net says. It's an article about refurbished units, and it says that the model number, not the serial, the model number can easily identify your iPhone status, whether it's new, refurbished, personalized, or a replacement. So not customized, but personalized. What does that mean? I'm not sure. But if you go into settings, general, about, you should see your model number. It's going to start with an M in most cases. The example here is MQCL22L, something like that. Well, that's what it should say. However, if there is an F in front of the model number instead of an M, that supposedly indicates that the phone has been refurbished, which means that no, you're not getting a new phone. And if you go to buy a used phone from someone, it's probably very helpful to know whether or not that phone has had to be sent in for a warranty repair. At least you get a little insight into the history there. So something good to know. I will actually give you this link right now, just in case anyone is interested or has any input on it, because again, I don't want to give this information as being solid until I do a little more research. But if you want to take a look at the article, this is where it's located. And if it's true, it's really good news for us, because when someone presents something as being brand new and it's not, that's, it's a little shady if you ask me. And for whatever reasons they've chosen to do that, if there's a way for us to find out if they're telling the truth or not, I think that's awesome. Hello, Evan Hartman. How's it going? Had to step back, but I'm back. Nate. Nate, I had a question for you last week, and I can't remember what it was. It is Abe Lincoln's birthday today, apparently. And I thought it was interesting because, you hear all the same things about Abe Lincoln all the time. He slayed vampires and was really tall. But, beyond that, I was reading some interesting facts about Abe Lincoln. Apparently, he had a very high-pitched voice, which sounds really interesting. If you think about him delivering like the Gettysburg Address or something and talking with a really high-pitched voice that a lot of people described as being unpleasant to listen to. And you think about this guy who's like, I don't know, he's like 6'20" or something, and speaking in a really high voice would have been entertaining, on top of the fact that apparently he did not always have a beard. They say that some young girl like 10, 11 years old wrote him a letter and said, you should grow a beard because beards are in style. And no one's really confirmed whether or not he took that advice, but he did later on end up growing a beard. They said that he is also not a particularly good reader and had difficulty with a lot of words, in particular, or speller, I should say, not reader. He had a bad time spelling and apparently really struggled with the word inaugural when it came to figuring out how to spell it. I thought that was a trip, kind of interesting. I'm doing well. How are you? I'm doing awesome, Evan. Thank you for asking. I'm always happy to see you guys here, and I hope everything's going well for you, and your weekend was great. I had a great time, went and saw a show, and back to work, back to the grind, so thank you for asking. I appreciate that. All right, so the other thing that I wanted to bring up just briefly here is, but it's, until I remember what it was I wanted to ask Nate, which I can't at the moment, is this. So I went on to a group, phone repair group on Facebook, which is very helpful, very enjoyable. I love getting information from there, and at the same time, it's one of those things where you have to kind of dig through and pick and choose who you want to listen to and who you don't, and there's some conflicting info and some angry people and drama. So for that reason, I generally stay away from Facebook. But there are some good resources there. You just kind of have to sift through and find them. Let's see, a voice that people do. So yeah, I love this group. And I saw something on there that I'm not going to point out who it was. I think it's a bad idea, and it's just in poor taste to really call someone out on, whatever your business practice is, that's what you do. And if that works for you, great. And I'm not going to debate anyone because we're all big kids and we know how to do things our way. But this is the analogy that I draw. So this person made a statement that whenever they replace a screen on an iPhone 6s, they never disconnect the battery. And apparently this is a thing. Like I just assumed that when people found out if you don't disconnect the battery on a phone, which should be electronics 101, when you're dealing with anything, if you've ever dealt with a car or anything that has a battery plugged into it, the first thing that you do is unplug the battery, because things happen, and you can cause damage, and people know this. You can, in some cases, end up harming yourself. You can definitely end up harming the device that you're working with. So number one is always disconnect the battery. Well, someone discovered a long time ago that it is possible to disconnect a screen from an iPhone and plug it back in, and if you do it just right, in many cases you won't cause problems. And in particular on the iPhone 4 series, we had a guy who would test screens. He'd unplug and plug screens all day long with the battery connected, and it wasn't a problem because there's not really a lot in the vicinity that can be damaged unless you're particularly careless. Now on the 6S, that is not the case. They have a line that is right next to a grounding point on the connector for the display, and if you're off by just a hair when you plug that thing in, and we all know that those things are not always easy to plug in. Sometimes it's a little difficult to line them up. You have to be careful not to smash down on them. Well, long story short, as a lot of you already probably know, you can blow out the backlight or part of the backlight system. And it's typically a filter that goes, but potentially something worse could happen, especially if one who didn't know what they were doing decided to just run a jumper instead of replacing the filter, which is protection for that circuit. So this person bragged about how they never disconnected a battery on an iPhone 6s, and they never had any problems with it, and they plugged them in, and they were so good they didn't have to worry about unplugging the battery, and it saved them, I don't know, 12 seconds on each repair, or whatever amount of time it takes to take that little panel off and disconnect the battery. And of course he got berated and criticized and you know, you can imagine how that conversation went, because there are quite a few people out there who have been working with electronics long enough to know that this is just basic, you know, first thing you learn, disconnect the power, right? If you're going to be fooling around under the hood. So he said, you know what? It's not a problem for me. This is the way I do it. You know, if you guys can't do it, that's your problem. I'm so good, I don't have to worry about unplugging the battery. And I immediately thought about this image. You remember this knife game that people play where they take the knife and they go like this, you know, over their hands? And there are some people that are very good at this game. And there are people who are able to execute this process without stabbing themselves in the hand. And for that, I'm okay. If you want to do this to your hand, that's fine. No problem. But don't take my hand and set it on the table and show off your skills and how good you are and how accurate you are and how you never hurt anybody if I don't volunteer for that. And I see this as almost the same thing. When you take a customer's phone and you say, well, I'm so good, I don't have to disconnect the battery. You're saying, I'm so good with the knife, I'm not going to stab you in the hand, because you're not asking for their permission to do this repair in a way that we know can potentially cause problems. Even if you're so good that that's probably not going to happen, you're still assuming that the customer's okay with that. And for that reason, I think this is a terrible thing, not only to do, but to brag about on a public forum, you know, on a place where other people can see, you know, potentially customers can see you brag about how you cut corners and take unnecessary risks because of your ego, I guess, or like I said, to, you know, just to save a small amount of time. So I'd have to assume that there are going to be a certain number of people out there, hopefully, who read this and said, I'm not taking my phone to this guy because he doesn't follow basic safety steps, you know, doesn't just do things the right way because it's the right way to do it. He has to have a reason to, and that reason will be the first time that he blows a filter on an iPhone 6s and says, oops, you know, hopefully learns from that. And we know from the number of repairs that we get from other shops who have attempted to do these types of repairs and cause problems and don't have the equipment or the experience to fix that problem after the fact. So he's definitely not the only person by any means that practices this type of, you know, this type of behavior, because we get people coming in regularly saying, I took my phone here, now I have this problem, bring it back in, open it up, and yeah, you're missing some screws, they didn't unplug this is blown. Yeah, it's no wonder this happened. So very unfortunate, because really the only person who's suffering from this in the short term is the customer. You know, over time, obviously, if you had a lot of those problems, you're going to start losing people. But, you know, in the meantime, this is a really shady thing to do, just to say, I'm going to take unnecessary risks with my customer's equipment and not tell them about it in the process. So I don't know. I hope they're getting a really great deal. Folks, that is about all for today. I do have something really cool. We have got guests. Let me pull up my little list here. I've got all sorts of people. For those of you who can't make the Thursday night hangout, it's at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you can, I invite you to join us. If not, you can always watch the replay, but it's definitely more fun when we have people in the chat. You know, that's the main reason I enjoy doing the live stream format. We are going to have Chris Voss. If you don't know who Chris Voss is, you should look him up. He is Mr. Social Media. This guy is everywhere. You'll find him on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, anywhere you can possibly imagine. We also have Andy Isom has confirmed he's going to be showing up from the learnhowgroup.com. That will be this Thursday at 6 p.m. And then the following week, I'm hoping we have a couple other guys, but again, I want to confirm they're showing up. We actually have a couple ladies coming on who are big into tech as well, and I will let you know as soon as that schedule becomes available who and when that's going to be, because I want to make sure that they've confirmed for dates before I start talking. But this Thursday, we're going to have a great lineup. It's going to be a blast. And if you have questions for either of those people or the companies that they represent, have those ready to go, because I always tell them, I'm going to ask you what you do and what kind of phone you use. And other than that, most of it's going to come from the chat. So things that you guys want to know that relate to them. I was changing a light bulb. This is Evan Hartman. I was changing a light bulb on a work light, and since I was just replacing a bulb, I didn't disconnect it from the wall, and my arm started to feel funny when I realized I was being electrocuted. I don't know what kind of bulb you're changing, Evan, but I can tell you right now, if you've got fluorescent tubes and you hit that thing just right, it will knock you off the ladder for sure. I've seen it happen before to someone who thought they were so good, and I sat back and said, are you not going to turn the breaker off? And he goes, no, not a problem. Those ballasts store somewhere in there. I imagine there's capacitors or something, but even when the light's switched off, they have a lot of juice running through them. And man, those are 110. I'm not sure what the amperage is, but yeah, man, that can be bad. If it has a direct path to your heart, it can certainly interrupt its rhythm, which is scary. Doesn't generally happen. We have, reasonable amount of resistance in our skin, but potentially things can go bad, especially if you're standing in water, obviously. But man, I'm glad you're still around to talk about it, because that can be bad. Vernil, need to talk to you about coming to Trinidad. And I've been looking at Trinidad, Vernil, because when you mentioned that a few weeks ago, I was checking it out, and you guys have all kinds of cool, interesting stuff going on there. And one of these days, I certainly hope that I can visit. Sounds like a lot of fun. What do you have, like volcanoes and mud to run through and all kinds of interesting stuff that I've probably never seen before. So yeah, man, it's on my list. It is on my list for sure. Beha, I recently went into batteries and bulbs for a battery on a key fob, and the girl that was ahead of me online was there to do an iPhone 7 repair. They advised her that more than likely after the repair... Okay, hold on a second. Let me make sure I read this correctly. Beha says, I recently went into batteries and bulbs for a battery on a key fob. The girl that was ahead of me online was there to do an iPhone 7 repair, and they advised her that more than likely after the repair, she would lose functionality of the button and made her sign a waiver. So batteries and bulbs is doing this now too. Folks, I hope that if any of you are not technicians and you're customers, or people who want to get their phones repaired, or maybe customers are asking you about your pricing and stuff like that, if you ever go to a repair shop for something as routine as, I don't know, just about any repair outside of maybe water damage or data recovery, if someone says to replace your screen, your charge port, your camera, anything that could possibly go wrong with your phone, and tells you there's a risk that something else isn't going to work after we get done, especially a home button, right off the bat, signing a waiver, that should be an indication. If you go to have something repaired, and you've got to sign a waiver that says that if they mess it up, it's not their fault, you should walk. Turn around and walk and don't go back there. That is insane. If battery and bulbs is doing that, I think that's really bad for business, among other things. That's crazy. Why would you, and just in case anyone's wondering, if anyone has stumbled upon here and wants to know, whenever we do a repair for a customer and we say we're going to replace this screen, we take responsibility and liability in case something goes wrong with the phone while we're repairing that. To the extent that occasionally we get a phone that has a problem that we didn't know about, and when it was working, if it was working when it came in and we do our checklist when we receive that phone, when we hand it back to the customer, it has to be in the same working condition. Otherwise, we take the blame and we fix the problem. And we err in favor of the customer when it becomes questionable, in most cases. Now, if we have something like water damage or severe physical damage, where we go, hey, this phone, it's not going to be 100% no matter what. We're going to try to get your data back. Maybe if we don't get the data back, you don't pay, but don't expect this to be a functioning phone when we get finished with that. We record that on the invoice. We don't even have a waiver that we have a customer sign, because how could that ever be disputed? When the phone comes in with severe physical damage and it's stated and the customer signs on the invoice that this is what the phone looked like when it got here, there's never any question. There's never any reason that they would come by and say, oh, well, you guys didn't tell me my phone was going to work. It wasn't working when it got here. But if someone says we're going to replace your phone, your screen, and your home button might not work when we get done, unless there was something else they saw inside the phone that led them to believe that's not something anyone should ever accept. That's ridiculous. On the bright side, now it's an LED. Let's see. It was a regular style bulb I put in a regular room. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, those LED lights last for what, 17 years or something? Incandescent. Hey, what's up, Johnny Chang? Incandescent bulb just burn you if it's really hot. Yeah, well, on the outside, if you break the... Oh, here's a tip real quick. If you ever break an incandescent bulb or any other type, the screw-in bulbs that you put like into a ceiling fan or anything like that, I had one break off on me while I was twisting the bulb out. Here's a life hack for you. I should probably make a video about this. Try taking a wine cork and shoving the wine cork into the part that's broken off inside of where you twist the bulb in, and it will usually grab on enough. And also it does not conduct electricity. So if you jam a wine cork into a light socket, you're not going to get shocked as long as you're only touching the cork. And in my case, I was able to get in a good enough grip to just twist the cork, and I got the broken part of the base from the bulb out of the out of the ceiling fan fixture. And they're actually two bulbs that I think someone just over tightened and they got stuck, or maybe because of the changes in temperature, you know, back and forth, eventually it kind of, I don't want to say it fused together, but it got stuck. But that was my life hack. It worked out really well. When working on a phone, I know it's all on me if something breaks. And yeah, I mean, that's how it should be. I can't believe that a company like Batteries and Bulbs would have that policy. I mean, I believe you, Beha, because I know you. But that's crazy that they would tell their employees to do that. I don't understand why that would be a thing. You know, if you're not going to be able to fix an iPhone 7 without ruining the home button, don't offer to fix iPhone 7s. That's ridiculous. Especially the way Apple implement their biometric authentication hardware. Raw potato to the rescue. Hey, that'll work too. Yep, raw potatoes. You can also use them as Rain-X for your windshield if your wipers aren't working. Another cool life hack. I need to start doing some more of those, right? Here, cut a potato in half that's warm. Yeah, so potatoes or wine corks, whatever works for you. Whatever you do, don't stick your fingers or a pair of pliers in there if they're not insulated. I've seen that. I've seen so many people pick up a regular pair of pliers that don't have insulation on the handle and go to start doing stuff into an electrical switch or conduit or something that's still turned on, and that's going to be bad news. That's all I had for you folks today. Thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate it. I've got to run a bunch of errands, and this is one thing about Mondays is I've got postal stuff that's got to get dropped off, so I do have to run out pretty quick. I will be back on Thursday this week, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Again, next week, 2 p.m. here, same time, same place. If you're not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. If you haven't hit the like on here, I would appreciate it so much if you like this video. If everyone on here does that right now, I'll have 15 likes, which will be awesome, because then YouTube or somebody will like what I'm doing. And beyond that, make sure that you hit the bell notification icon if I didn't already say that 12 times, and look forward to this Thursday. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope that you can make it, and if not, guys, I'll see you again here next week, same time, same place. Have a great week.